we've been given the topic of conflict resolution. Now, this is a very important area if you're working in the industry. Because of the nature of the work that we do, it's very fast-paced, a lot of collaboration required. Often there is pressure from clients, deadline pressure and so on. So that leads to a lot of potential conflict situations. So let me take you through detail on conflict management, and we'll start with understanding what exactly conflict is. So conflict typically occurs whenever people disagree about something. So not only in work but also in life. Whenever there's a disagreement, there's conflict. That's why we have wars and so on. It's also important to understand that conflict is common. We experience conflict every day with our family members, with our friends, co-workers and so on. But what is important is to learn from conflict so that it doesn't occur again, and if it does occur, you need to ensure that it's positive. There are also techniques that can be used to work through a conflict situation successfully so that there's a win-win situation. And particularly in the workplace, it's important that professionalism is maintained at all times. It's important to be very professional about conflict. So no fisticuffs. There are two types of workplace conflict. So the first type is a personality clash. So this occurs when two people just don't get along. We've all met people who rub us the wrong way. So whenever you encounter somebody that you don't like, somebody that you don't get on, somebody who's being obnoxious, right? There's potential for personality clash. So these type of conflicts are usually counterproductive. It impacts the individual as well as the organization. The effect to the company can be a downturn in productivity, and these sort of conflicts need to be resolved immediately for the benefit of all parties. A task clash is when people's ideas or decisions or actions do not match. So this sort of thing happens very frequently. There is nothing personal, so you don't have an issue with the person, it's just the idea or the action. So can anyone give me an example about a task clash? Have any of you worked at any time in your life on a part-time basis perhaps? So typically, let me give you an example about a task clash. So let's say there are two heads of two different technical areas. One might propose that we do things in one way and use a particular set of technologies or a particular process, and the other might disagree, right? So that's a disagreement purely because two people don't agree on a work-related aspect, right? So if I were to pick an example on the DB area, one architect might suggest Oracle, for example, and the other might disagree vehemently and suggest MySQL. Right? So that's a simple example. So these sort of conflicts are usually not counterproductive. People should use these sort of conflicts to brainstorm and reach a compromise. Sometimes the outcome can be positive because it can generate better work practices, a healthy debate can ensue, and both parties may potentially learn. So, for example, the architect proposing MySQL would probably learn about some features of Oracle as a result of this conflict. And it can go on to build and strengthen existing relationships. In conflict situations, it's important to identify your emotions so that you know yourself, how you react. So some things to take a note of. is, do you get frustrated and angry with the other person, or is it only when particular work-related issues are raised, right? So that helps to identify whether it's the person or whether it's a work-related issue. Is your anger out of proportion and unreasonable? Would you feel the same way if somebody completely different comes and says the same thing, right? So that's another way of identifying whether your emotion is justified or not. Do you have respect for that person, or basically do you have no regard at all for that person? What are the warning signs of your anger? Do you usually react spontaneously, or do you take a moment, do you take a step back and consider carefully before responding? Or alternatively, do you agree with the person all the time and give in? Right? So these are some of the things that you should think about in coming up with a strategy to resolve conflict situations. These are some ways to identify other people's emotions. So if the voice changes pitch, if there's a raised tone, some people turn pink when they're angry, some people sweat profusely, tense body posture, some people have a penetrating stare. So you can be on the lookout for these warning signs to identify whether you're actually upsetting somebody. So the causes of workplace conflict are the result of chiefly of poor communication. Right? A lot of issues are because of two people or two groups not communicating properly with each other. Lack of acceptance of different values. Different people have a different sense of values. Then it can be lack of understanding of the approach to work. Right? So some people are very organized and some people are typically very disorganized. So in one of my previous places of work, this was a frequent source of conflict, because the people who are very organized, who are very methodical, who follow diligent process, just can't make head or tail of what the more creative and artistic people do. Of course, the work output from both groups can be the same. Both parties are equally productive, but they have different, completely different approaches to work, and two parties don't agree on the approach. You do get people in organizations with selfish interests and personal goals, people who are politically motivated. There are personality differences. Some people are very direct. Some people have very extroverted personality. Some people are quieter and more introverted. Another source of conflict is the competition for resources, particularly in IT companies. There is usually a very keen tussle for good resources. So that's a potential source of conflict among managers. You can also have performance issues. So if one group or one party is not performing up to potential, the other group might feel that they are being held down. Also, performance issues can lead to missed deadlines, lack of productivity, and so on. So frequently between managers and employees, or between two groups, these are a common scenario. There are cases of unfair treatment and favoritism by managers. There's also sometimes lack of equal opportunities for employees in some organizations. Unclear job roles and insufficient training can contribute to conflict, as can a poor work environment. So if it's a very stressful environment, for example, with a lot of noise or a lot of clutter, or an environment that's dirty, that can lead to increases in stress levels and cause conflict. Bullying and harassment, don't rule this out. Some managers are capable of harassment of employees. And also, another cause of issues in the workplace is when personal issues, right, your family issues, your marital issues, spill over to the workplace and cause stress. The symptoms of conflict, of course, are very counterproductive to the organization: low motivation, stress, productivity issues, absenteeism. Some employees are disgruntled and refuse to cooperate. In an IT company, a software company, it can lead to quality problems, missed deadlines, which can be catastrophic for the organization, particularly when there are clients involved. There can be reduced collaboration and teamwork. As you know, teamwork is very important in a software company. It's very important that teams get together and collaborate and solve problems. And there can be distrust and split camps. These sort of things can really completely tear an organization apart, and also office gossip and other related phenomena. Next, I'm going to talk with conflict with managers. I understand that most of you haven't worked so far, and there won't be too many incidents of this nature. It is not very often that you find obnoxious managers, particularly in the IT industry, but it's useful to know some points when it comes to dealing with conflict with superiors. So we all know that a good manager will communicate and understand his employees, be involved with business decisions, and show appreciation when necessary. Difficult behavior by superiors can involve lack of communication, verbal bullying, inflexible thinking, right? Not being receptive to feedback, and downright rudeness. So some strategies that you shouldn't be using when faced with a scenario like this is using the same behavior. So if you go and basically demonstrate rude behavior and shout back at your boss, that would not be advisable as a first step. Noise, silence, and meek compliance. Basically, if you feel that you have done nothing wrong, and if you feel that you are being victimized unfairly, I suggest that you raise it diplomatically with your boss. So there's a slide on that later on. So avoiding interaction completely with the manager is also not a good thing. Your manager may spot it, and the rude and obnoxious behavior may continue. Also, absenteeism will also not help. It may be counterproductive to your career aspirations. So here are some strategies in dealing with difficult managers. First step is to find out what the reason is for this particular conflict. The issues to consider are whether the manager's behavior is consistent. Some people are in general bad temper. So find out whether the manager treats only you differently, or whether his behavior is consistent with respect to your peers. Is there some unresolved dispute? Perhaps there's something running on the back of the manager's mind. You may have upset the manager in some way in the past. So check first whether you have been singled out. Are you giving your manager something to dislike about you? Right? For example, poor performance or some associated reason. Right? Is there some reason that your manager doesn't like you? As a reality check, what you can do is you can ask your colleagues whether they feel that the manager's response to you is different. Perhaps you are overreacting and you're the one with the problem. Perhaps it is you who are too sensitive. So you need to figure out whether the problem is on the manager's end clearly, and whether there's a clear case of harassment or abuse, or whether you are overreacting. Some tips to build a better relationship with the manager. They say that the first step is to understand your boss. So take a couple of weeks or months and understand the manager's personality. Ask colleagues who get along well with their manager what their secret is. Perhaps They have the knack for not rubbing people the wrong way. Also, in a conflict scenario, important to stay calm, right? It is possible that your manager has poor people skills, but you don't need to take it personally and reciprocate in a similar manner. The first step to be taken is to assert yourself in a calm manner, right? Don't yell back the boss. Also, don't take the view silently. You can start by explaining very politely that you don't appreciate this sort of rude and unreasonable behavior on the part of the boss. And you can ask whether you actually done something wrong, or whether you can do something to improve the situation, and this may open up some lines of communication. Another thing you can do is change your communication style. If you're always responding to the manager, you can take a step back, listen to what the manager has to say, and then make a calculated response. It could be caused by differences in working style. I mentioned earlier how differences in attitude, personality, and work ethic, as well as values, can cause conflict, so that could be the reason. If those steps are not successful, you can perhaps, if it's a large organization, seek some advice from the HR department. Or if HR can't assist you as an extreme step, and this is, you need to think very carefully before taking this step. What you can do is perhaps reach out to your manager's direct supervisor. In extreme cases, of course, sometimes the problem cannot be solved at all. You need to consider either leaving the organization if the behavior is unbearable, or alternatively request a transfer to another department. So the next section is the management of conflict. Now, in any conflict, the question to be asked is, why do people react the way they do? Why do some people have certain behavior patterns? In certain situations, some people will always react the same way. So even if you do the same, if you produce the same action 100 times, all 100 times, you can predict the reaction or the behavior pattern. So there are two factors influencing human behavior, as you know, right? One is nature, which includes genetics. This means this refers to the way you're born, right? You can't change some of these factors. So genetics, brain structure, which includes your emotions, the way your hormones work, the way your neurotransmitters work, is one factor influencing behavior. Second factor is nurture. The nurture is all experiences that you gain since your early childhood. So they say that your early childhood upbringing until you're about 7 or 8 years old contributes a lot towards your future behaviors. So sometimes your behavior patterns are conditioned as a result of your early childhood upbringing. Your faith, your culture, religion, attitudes, the values, and the sense of ethics that you develop in your childhood also contribute to the sort of person that you grow up to be. So there are other personality factors like authority, whether you actually respect authority or whether you disrespect authority, whether you prefer working independently and not under supervision. Your rapport, that is how well you interact with other people. Persuasion is your capacity to influence other people and persuade people and achieve an outcome that's favorable to you. Coercion is basically achieving your outcomes by use of force. So if you can threaten somebody and bend them to your will, that's coercion. So all these are factors that influence human behavior, and it's important to understand, particularly when faced with a conflict scenario, why your adversary is behaving in this manner. There are 16 different personality types. Now, These can't be seen very well on the screen, but I'll read out one or two. So Einstein apparently is rational, contemplative, and has a knack for problem solving. The downside is that people with similar personalities can also be critical. If you take Winston Churchill, he is an ESTP type, bold, tactical, with an energy for problem solving. They can have a harder time focusing on concepts and theories. If you take Mother Teresa, who is an ISFJ, careful, considerate, they tend to remember small details about people and projects, but can be painstakingly thorough. So, during your careers, and you're just starting off with internships, you will meet people with these 16 different personality types. So, identify the type of personality and use suitable strategies to deal with them. So next we arrive to the actual brass tacks or nuts and bolts of conflict resolution. The goal of resolving a conflict is achieving a positive outcome for both parties, or at the very least for you. So start by articulating the causes of the conflict. Realize that there will be different perceptions of the problem. Communicate how you want the conflict resolved and the benefits of resolving the conflict. It's important also to address all these issues face to face. So sending an email with a solution or highlighting a problem is not the way to go. When resolving a conflict, always stick to the relevant issues. Don't bring irrelevant issues that may antagonize the other party from the past. And also address specific behaviors and situations. So don't be personal, right? If you go down and point out to weaknesses or attack the person's character, you will not achieve a positive outcome. So address the behavior or the situation, but not the person. Also take time resolving the conflict, right? If it's difficult to resolve a conflict in 1 or 2 days, take time out and schedule another suitable date for resolving the conflict, because some conflicts that have gone down the wire might not be very easy to solve. So emotions get in the way. So the suggestion is to take time and resolve it step by step. Some general tips are to open yourself up. It's important to listen to the other person's perspective. Usually, there's a reason why your adversary has a different perspective, right? So it could be in self-interest, it could be because of a genuine reason. It could be that, in my earlier example, where there were 2 architects debating about the technology, it could be that one architect feels very passionately that the technology that he chooses is correct for various reasons. Benefits could outweigh the negatives. So understand exactly what that other person is saying and put yourself in the other person's shoes. In difficult situations, use your willpower to stay calm. Don't show any disrespect when trying to resolve conflict. Personal preparation prior to resolving the conflict is very important. You need to know exactly what you're going to say and how you're going to say it if you're interested in resolving the conflict. The timing is important. Don't choose a time that's inconvenient or a time that is too close to the last conflict scenario, right? And also location. So neutral venue is recommended. Leave your ego at the door. The way you approach the conflict resolution scenario initially, your opening comments are very important. And don't let your pride get in the way. Also remember that forgiveness is always a virtue. when dealing with conflict, start your sentences with I and not you. You could go on to say that I felt this and that, without saying you did this to me. So describe behaviors and feelings in that manner. Always talk positively, explain how you see things and ask for the other person's perspective. So the thing to do is to seek areas of agreement. You may not agree on everything. So if there are 5 points to be debated, if you can come to an agreement on 3 of them, perhaps that is acceptable. Of course, examine the consequences of the solution. If you give it too much, that might be counterproductive for you. People usually get into conflict situations because there's something in it for them. So understand the what's in it for me factor. View conflict as a learning opportunity. I mentioned that certain types of conflict can be beneficial, and focus on making the work environment a better place for both of you or the 2 groups, as the case may be, to live. So there are 5 strategies to resolve conflict. There were 2 psychologists by the name of Thomas and Kilman who in 1976 came up with these 5 strategies, and this is actually the last section of my presentation, so I'll take you through each of these. So the first strategy is avoidance. So in a conflict scenario, avoiding the conflict is the first strategy. So you can either ignore a conflict situation, you can postpone it, and perhaps find a time when the situation is less intense, and take the philosophical view that everyone has different opinions and just forget about it. So this sort of strategy is to use for minor and non-recurring conflicts. Some potential outcomes can be that the situation can be exacerbated at some instances, and of course in some cases the situations can be diffused. A potentially explosive situation can be diffused. The next strategy is collaboration. So working together to find a beneficial solution to both parties is the goal here. So this is useful for actual problem solving between teams, and the goal is to find a win-win solution for the conflict or disagreement. So this sort of strategy is to be used when you have a lot of time available, and it's a step-by-step approach, and you need to gain agreement at each stage before continuing. The third strategy is compromise. So compromise is giving a little and getting a little, finding middle ground where each party is partially satisfied. So these a strategy to be used when a detailed collaboration cannot be done because there's insufficient time. Also, the time to use it is when the situation is less complex. And the potential outcome is that the key expectations of each parties are partially resolved, and you compromise on some areas. So competition is asserting your viewpoint at the expense of everyone else's. So this is an aggressive strategy, and it's to be used rarely. The outcome is that even though you may win, it will lead to a poor working relationship, and of course, since you're asserting your authority, you can be seen as aggressive and arrogant. And what you need to consider is why you feel your viewpoint is more correct or relevant than anyone else's. So there may be times where you need to force the issue, but when forcing it, you need to be certain that you are correct. The final strategy is accommodation. So in this case, you surrender your own needs, right, and accommodate the other party wholeheartedly. It's to be used if it can actually produce a favorable outcome. You need to be sure that you can live with the solution. So if it's something that you cannot deal with over time, that's not to be used. Because if you are the one who's doing the accommodating, you may gradually reset the way that you work. And in this case, similar to the previous one, you need to consider why your viewpoint is less correct and relevant than anyone else's. So that concludes my presentation. Any quick questions?